You're listening to Tonebenders, the Sound Designers Podcast. Let's do this.
Hey everybody, welcome to Tonebenders. My name is Tim Muirhead and I will be your host for today. We have a special guest host joining us today in Mark Kilborn. Hello and welcome, Mark. How are you doing today?
I'm great, man. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here to talk about this game.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun talk today. Listeners will know Mark as a very active member of the online sound community in both post and game audio groups, forums, Slacks, Twitters, and everything and so forth. He was the audio director on Call of Duty franchise, as well as working on other landmark series like Forza Motorsport, Tony Hawk, Modern Welfare, among many others. His projects have won MPSE Golden Reels, Gang Awards. He's been nominated for BAFTA and DICE Awards. He's seen it all. Wowzers, Mark. It's really great to have you aboard. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Today we're going to be talking about the new PS5 game, Returnal. It's a third-person shooter sci-fi based game with time loops happening on a shape-shifting planet. The game really takes advantage of the new sound capabilities of the latest PlayStation console, especially the 3D audio. One online review mentions the audio specifically, saying, wearing headphones allows you to enjoy the 3D audio experience where you'll hear gnarls and growls of the vicious enemies above, below, and behind you. Falling rocks have never sounded so menacing. Ooh, that's a pretty cool getting the audio mentioned in the reviews. That's awesome. Joining Mark and I today will be Loic Couthier, the lead sound designer of Returnal. Based out of London, Loic is a French sound designer with 12 years experience in games, including 9 years designing audio at Microsoft and Sony. Welcome to the show.
Hey guys, thanks for hosting.
No problem. Thanks for joining us. Also sitting in with us today is Toivo Kallio. Toivo wore a few hats on the game Returnal. He was a Foley artist, character vocal designer, as well as character sound designer. Working from Espoo, Finland, you have heard his work in games and films like The Little Prince, which is one of my kids' favorite movies. So glad to have you on, Toivo. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So Returnal's pretty amazing. I've spent a little bit of time playing it. I've really enjoyed it. I want to dive into 3D sound because it's not only the new feature, but it was one of the things that really impressed me with this game. I've listened to many 3D headphone systems in the past, and I've never been completely sold, but what I was hearing in this game is shockingly good. It's really impressive. You get this strong sense that things are happening around you. So I'm curious how working for this format informed your design process. I mean, I'm sure this was something you were thinking about from the beginning, right?
Actually, not. So it was not from the beginning because the game was developed for 4 years and CSG joined after 2 years of development. And this is when the thinking about making it a 3D audio title happened. So before that, it was Toivo working on it for a year and a half. And at this point, it was worked on as a 7.1 game. But then at some point, it became this discussion, we need to make it a 3D audio title. And I was not there in the project, of course. I was not involved, so I don't know exactly how the discussion happened, but probably thinking about releasing the game for PS5, and that's one of the big features, and it looks like the game has a lot of nice action that takes advantage of 360 combat and a lot of verticality, and someone must have decided this is a great game for 3D audio. We're going to make it a big title for that. And then this is when, my team got involved, and we have a lot of experience doing 3D audio for PSVR before. You're right in saying that when you start dealing with a 3D audio title, you need to know from the beginning, because it changes everything. It changes how you're going to produce the content, record it, how your mixer is going to be set up. There is a lot to do on that. So when we arrived, it was a bit of a reset, and also looking at the content that we had, what was compatible with a 3D audio project and what wasn't. What would we lose, have to redo, or keep, preserve, but make it work within the right formats, basically. So the first couple of months were about setting that up, making sure it can work on the PS5, and we're also experimenting with the PS5 3D audio. It was the first time for us. So there is a lot of work just figuring out how to make this sound the best on the PS5. In many ways, it's an improvement on the PSVR system, in terms of more processing, more objects going on, and also the higher quality for the filtering, for the binaural decoding. So we had to experiment with this. But that was actually the main reason why my team got involved, is our experience in that field. to help Housemarque deliver a 3D audio title.
From my perspective, this project had a few of these incredible learning phases. I'm a man with a background in the linear media, and Returnal happens to be the first big game production I ever got involved with. I was relatively green when I began making sounds for the game at Housemarque in early 2018. And as Loic said, the game was originally made to be like a regular traditional surround mix. But yeah, when the rumors first came in about this game being even a showcase example of the new upcoming 3D audio tech, I was of course pretty intimidated at first. But then when I realized that I got to be a part of this world-class team, which is CSG, and Loic was really gracious towards me and took me into the team and, well, basically taught me everything about 3D audio along with the tech guys. Still, I felt like the new guy in many ways when CSG joined the production, but it was great. I got to bring my narrative, cinematic approaches to the character sound design, and transferring all that into 3D audio form and making it compatible with it was a fascinating experience, especially since the game has these first-person sequences here and there. I got to really experiment different technical approaches with recording the Foley there. What an adventure this 3-year period of production was with these guys.
So the mention of the first-person sequences is interesting. I mean, I noticed that, and I don't want to spoil too much for the listeners, but there are moments in this game that are very personal. It's not the game isn't necessarily what it looks like from the start.
Yeah.
It looks like an adventure happening on an alien planet, but there are some very personal pieces to this story.
Definitely, yeah.
And I was really struck by not just the fact that it shifts to first-person perspective, but the sonic approach changed pretty dramatically when you were in these first-person areas that were very related to the character's past. So what were some of the differences in your approach to, for example, recording Foley? I mean, everything sounds different. Footsteps, all of it sounds different when you're inside of Celine's helmet. Talk a little bit about what the differences were between third-person perspective and first-person perspective for Foley, if you can.
Right, yeah. I guess the biggest difference from the recording perspective or point of view is the miking techniques. I tried at first to use these regular traditional XY stereo micings with the suit movements and the footsteps, but I ended up using a binaural in-ear mic set to most of the first-person movements, for example. And then when I brought that stuff into Wwise, I got to move that stereo image even more below the listener with the Wwise position settings, which made it sound like really 3D. Then the footsteps with the binaural decoding, I could hear the panning in Wwise. They are just regular stereo or mono recordings depending on the surface, which are just panned below the listener. It sounds realistic in a way I hadn't heard before in any game I've played. So it was really interesting to record all these layers and then use the 3D panning to make them work together.
I think a lot of it comes just from the full mix being in 3D. And as soon as you change the listener position as being Celine, then you realize, oh, the feet are coming from the feet. And also like the body is coming from down here and everything feels where it should be. And it's kind of automatic, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
In brackets, because there is a lot of live mixing going on.
Yeah.
Even like the helmet processing on the voice. So it's when you're inside the helmet, you're in first order because the original recording was first order, Toivo, right?
Right, yeah, I recorded this impulse response from a motorcycle helmet. I stuck a little first order ambisonics mic into the helmet and then snapped my fingers around the helmet interior. It was a bit tricky to get both my hand and the mic to fit into the helmet. But yeah, the finger snap was the basis of an IR, which then is used as a convolution preset in Wise.
Yeah, and that becomes ambisonics positional when you're third person. So we always keep that IR. It's processing the dialogue live depending on your perspective. And for some time, the game had allowed you to switch between perspectives live.
Yeah.
Just for exploration, not for combat. And this kind of made us make it work live. So we needed this to make a nice transition. Made nice transition for everything, like the ambience, the rain, the Foley. So it has 2 different mixes, different formats. As I said, like just the voice itself is going to be omnidirectional ambisonics when you're inside the helmet and become very positional ambisonics when you're not. And the fact that we had this perspective switch that was in game allowed us to iterate a lot on that, because you could spend a lot of time A-being and exaggerating a little bit the contrast between the two. And what we have now in the game is a very simplified version of, you have a cinematic and the perspective changes, and you might think, oh, that maybe that's in the asset, but actually it's just live processing RTPCs and states that are just updating and doing all that stuff. And it's pretty cool when you know that it's not faked. It's just the whole mixing in 3D that is happening.
Yeah, I guess this is a great example of doing your pre-production well enough and your tech setup well enough so you get these easy solutions later. Whenever a cinematic gets changed, like the camera position suddenly changes and you're not married with your asset being baked in this position like it's traditionally set up usually. So it was really cool to have this tech supporting our dynamic solutions later.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with 3D audio, there is sometimes confusion with ambisonics as to having an ambisonics asset where the positions are printed in the assets and ambisonics live mixing. If you use the asset, then you're committing to the positions of everything in your scene. So it can be very dangerous, maybe good for a pre-rendered video. But once you're in game, you can really just use the power of being a video game where everything has an emitter and just exploit that. And we've done that a lot. And that works really well because, yes, there was a lot of iteration on the cinematics. And it's good to always have the positioning that you can trust, because just working within the ambisonics format is a lot more work. It takes more time to do anything.
Yeah.
So if you can just have all this ambisonics mixing within Wise, it's just much more flexible.
Absolutely.
And also you can always change formats, change from fifths to first order or even send to pass-through in Wise. You do that mixing in Wise, really. And it allows you to compare the render of everything as well.
In a way, you had to kind of divide your character into many more emitters of independent audio compared to the traditional approach where usually a character's sounds can be emitted from one single monaural position or emitter. But in this case, both palms of the hands had their own individual emitters. Both feet had their individual ones. The head emitted the voice and the torso, kind of the body movements mostly. So it was really like a granular approach with the character as well.
Yeah, this is where you need to know this is going to be a 3D audio title, that you need to have this level of separation on everything. Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it definitely informs how you hook all this stuff because you have to do all the bone assignments for all the sound triggers. I mean, I've done that, and not in a 3D audio context, but certainly even in surround, I've had to do that for scenes where you're very close to characters.
Yeah.
So how is reverb use different in the context of a mix like this versus just a standard 7.1 or 5.1 mix? Are you actually placing reverb returns within the space? Are they feeding, the mix? Or how does it work in this kind of a context?
So I guess it can be done in many different ways, but the way we've done it is that every space has a third order ambisonics IR, and it rotates with the world, which means, let's say you have a reflection on the left wall, that will always stay attached to the left wall. depending on your camera. So it feels really like you're in that place. So yeah, all the reverbs are ambisonics and all the content go through it according to the sound levels, normal. But yeah, it is a lot of work to create those reverbs. They're all IRs. We also have delays that are going on. We also have technology that does live reflections based on the physics. But it's more when you're exploring the world that you can hear this level of detail in combat. I actually turn a lot of the reverbs down because it would become a bit too much. Same for the delays. So yeah, actually reverb is a big deal, a big amount of work. And it's all in the ambisonics realm that we're doing all that, because it needs to be a 3D reverb, really.
And what are you guys using to create the IRs?
So to create the IRs, we use reverb plugins, delay plugins, and we use direct pulse to play that pulse through our chain. And so we basically, in the DAW, we're going to have some Reaper sessions that will be set up with some ambisonics encoders. So they are the ambisonic spanners. And we will do a lot of testing with, for example, the Foley of Celine, her voice, and have a video of a room and try to design the right reverb using IR reverbs. But yeah, using any sort of delays, any sort of tools that we have to design spaces. And we just design it and pan the things around in ambisonics. We don't need to have a lot of virtual emitters in that. But yeah, we position all those sounds so that it feels very wide and spacious. And then, yeah, by just testing the sounds from the game through that reverb and seeing, okay, that feels like creatively we like this. And also it feels very spacious. Usually we design a quite different sound for the lower and the upper areas. So it feels there is a real verticality in there. It's like in surround, you exaggerate the differences between up, down, the back or the front, so that it actually feels wide. Because sometimes it is technically wide, but you don't perceive that. So you have to play a bit more. I don't think we do a lot of out of phase things, just because with ambisonics, you never know exactly what's going to happen with the phase. You need to be careful. But yeah, it's basically just designing IRs. So when we are happy with the sound of it, as I said, we play that single sample pulse to record an IR that we put into the IR verb in Wise. Same way that we use Toivo's IR for the helmet.
I think the reverbs and the acoustic simulations is one of the best ones I've heard in a game. It sounds just exaggerated enough to make the areas feel immersive. And of course, this is a sci-fi game and it's not based on real-life simulation like a Battlefield game, for example. But this game can be really bold in its solutions.
Yeah, using delays also helps to create a special atmosphere. And we're using some Wise delays. It doesn't have to be all 3D. Just to create some little bounces, and it gives a mood to the sound.
How many people did you all have on the team for this?
So it is a good question, not an easy one to answer. Well, I know that we have the core team is 10, 12, including like CSG and Housemark. That means us in London and Toivo and Jeremy in Finland. And we had some outsourcing help at some point. But when we were towards the end, we had 30 sound designers on the game.
Yeah.
So that was very intense. It's just we had so much content.
Yeah, the team size just kept ramping up. I remember having a Zoom meeting at 9:30 p.m. Finnish time, and the other end was in Los Angeles, and Loic was in London, and we were talking about cinematic stuff. It was so cool and felt like a global production at that point.
That was good, but there is such a thing as having too many people. Yeah, at some point it becomes hard to manage, to make sure everybody's aligned. And yeah, if there is a lot of content and it needs to be done, you're going to need to find support.
The creatures in this game sounded really great. They had very striking vocals. I thought they had kind of a unique sound for each of them. So tell me a bit about the creature sound design process on Returnal.
So the creatures, I guess it begins with Greg and Harry, the directors. There was one term that was for everything really, but for the creatures even more so, is unconventional. They wanted them to sound as original as they were looking, which meant we could never go to any stereotype or anything. So, and it was good to have those guys helping us, reviewing us on the creatures, because we would go in many directions. And some of them that might feel very weird to us, because basically when you say no conventions, you never know, is it actually still working at this point? That was the main part I was trying to make sure was there to ensure we can have the feedback. But in terms of, is it selling the right craziness and stuff, that was more Housemarque, and they were here to review. And many times they pushed us beyond what we would have as sound designers. Sometimes you feel like, maybe I'm too far already. Creatively, it doesn't sound like this creature anymore. And actually, it does. And they were pushing us a lot on that, and that was good. From a high-level perspective, it was always about creating weird sounds for each creature. And after that, in the terms of the making, there's been so many various ways of making them. Very, very few of them have been made with synthesizers. But most of them are based on recordings, because it was during COVID for most of the time, and people had to do with what they had. Mainly it was Ash Reed, our senior sound designer. He was responsible for the creatures, and he did a good 90% of them. And so he had so many various processes for each of them. He's tried so many things, using his own voice for sure, using like some sort of paste or yogurt to create some weird textures as well, using a lot of crazy plugins. I know there is a lot of Granulate, where you can turn any sound into anything. This plugin is really good, really creative.
I remember vividly the first kind of previous video from Ash about a boss character, and we were like in awe about how crazy he can get with the sound design. I remember him telling me that one of the creatures, the thing that hangs from a ceiling, like the barnacle, I think it's called, which grabs Celine and lifts her up with these tentacles.
And you never see them before you hit them, which is
very
terrifying.
Yes, exactly. When you get close, the tentacles twitch towards you really quick, and it's really annoying. But I remember that creature being mostly recordings of a pug dog eating. And when he grabs Celine, there's this really like Jurassic Parky munching.
And wet. A lot of wet texture as well.
I remember adding also this funny little plop sound to when Celine gets off of the creature. There's this plop hidden in there somewhere.
I know in terms of processing that was something that was quite important. And I guess for all creature sound design, it's important is creating some resonances. So I know Ash used a lot of resonant filters to give that sort of vocal cord or cavity sound to it, and also to make all this hybrid content glue together and have the same personality for each creature. I think his main attention was on trying to sell the scale and the elements that might compose this creature, because we have some metallic enemies, we have some organic ones, we have some cosmic ones. And cosmic, there was a lot of discussions. What is cosmic going to sound like? Even now, it's difficult to explain what cosmic sound like. It depends for each creature, really. So, resonance was the key to give character and make it a believable sound that didn't sound like it was made in the studio, feeling more like worldized, but really about coming out of, vocal cords. And I think that is one of the most significant parts of the processing in the creatures.
Something that happens in the game, one of its kind of core values of the game maybe, is that when you die, you go back to the beginning. But the trick is that you don't play the same world again. Things in the world shapeshift and are different. But there are some sounds that you're coming back to when you start again every time. Were you trying to design that so that they were familiar sounds to make sure players knew they were back at the beginning? Or did you think about the idea of people are going to be hearing these sounds a lot? Can we differentiate them each time? How did you approach these kind of returning sounds?
Yeah, we have a lot of randomization, but the first thing, we have a lot of help from the level design itself, that every time you come back, is going to play in a different room, right? I mean, the first room is always the same, you're right. And for that, there is a lot of things that come from the game, such as the weather will be different.
Yeah, the amount of rain changes,
So that already changes quite a lot. If you're in the forest, it changes the soundscape quite a lot. There is a lot that we do that is related to the rain. Then after any creature sound that we have in the ambience is played with randomized timings and randomized positions, so that would accommodate for that. And, there is always this threshold of how characterful you want this to be. And when you go too far, then it becomes repetitive. We were careful about not having too much of that. So using the physical things that were more naturally variable, such as the weather, and not having too many sounds that were too characterful. For example, the sparks, we had a lot of iterations on them. Some at the beginning they were like super bombastic, very powerful, but after it gets a bit tiring, so we made them more standard, I would say, but just not exaggerated. They work for what you see, but they are not like picking your attention. There is not so much tonal content in them, so that you don't feel the repetition so much.
Right.
I guess there is a lot of attention on how tonal things can be, because tonal makes things cool, at least that for me. Tonal makes things cool and memorable, but that creates fatigue too. So there was like a lot of knowing how tonal do we want to go with this and this sound. The sounds that we wanted to be memorable, recognizable are tonal, like everything that is more like UI related or related to the core critical path of the game. That sounds like Returnal. And a lot of other things, they just sound like a world, and it's not that strong, and you cannot get so much fatigue from it. Also, I guess the mix is in that. We did have, in the iterations at the beginning, it was fatiguing, it was too much by having too many sounds in there. Maybe the game was doing a lot as well. So everybody polished that in terms of the repetition factor. Everybody polished the game design, the level design, and the sound design as well to accommodate with that. It's just because we were always back to that room. If you were getting fatigued, we would address it after some time.
It definitely was like a group effort. It also helps in the first room. For many players, the second time you return to that place is usually happening inside the spaceship in first person instead of the outside wake up that's the first time you play. Things like that also help from the game design perspective. And also the game randomizes the animations with what the main character wakes up with. So it's easy to use different vocals and different randomized Foley takes for those. So it doesn't feel too repetitive either. To touch on the rain as well, I had a ton of fun designing this footstep mixing structure in Wise that makes the footsteps feel and play wetter the more it rains. It's actually under the hood, it's really simple with like a percentage of rain as an RTPC, and then it just cross mixes these two containers with wet splash and the dry footstep with a couple of tricks with EQs. So it makes these rain footsteps feel really dynamic and wet and delicious for my taste.
Yeah, I guess it's good to say that in Returnal, because you're on that crazy planet, the rain can start and stop in a very non-Earth way.
Yeah.
Again, that's going to change the soundscape. All the detail added to the sound of rain and all the consequences like the footsteps. And then when it's not raining, it's different as well. You have a bit more creatures, you have more wind. That helps against fatigue because it's like changing the soundscape naturally by using what the game is doing.
Yeah.
There's obviously a lot of ambient detail, and I know the planet rearranges itself on every run through, but what I don't know is, are the map layouts completely procedural? Are they sequencing prefabricated sections of terrain? So I'm curious, how much of the ambience is placed in the environments versus just placed on the player and dynamically panning around? Basically, how did you manage to populate a world that was shifting constantly with details, and how did you keep it? I guess the other question is, how did you keep it so clean? Because rain and constant foliage movement can be really challenging from a mix perspective. There's so much basically noisy textures happening.
Yeah.
We started to figure out how we could auto-spawn audio emitters with certain objects. Like as soon as you get these spawned trees, for example, you would then spawn certain like leaf canopy rustling emitters at the top of them, and also auto-spawn some ambient bird sounds, these alien birds tied to certain objects. That's the big part of how the audioscape populates itself by each level generation. since the levels are compiled from these individual rooms, these smaller areas which are pre-built, it was easier to control how much stuff each room is going to have.
Yeah, it's good to know that it's not fully procedural.
Yeah.
I think it's been built procedurally, but you basically have finite amount of building blocks that are called rooms.
Exactly.
And the arrangement of those rooms is randomized every time you play. And what populates the room will change as well. So for us, it was actually a lot of manual implementation on those things. And a lot of, like the classic prefab techniques where if you have that tree, you play that sound. If you have that waterfall, you play that sound. But we have a lot of dynamic systems as well. So we're talking about the rain. So the rain, there was a lot of iterations on the actual playback of them. So a lot of the systems we have for ambience adapt to the physics. We have emitters that will attach to everything that's around you in 3D. And then it will play the sound of rain hitting that material from various distances in 3D audio. So the fact that it follows the physical structure of the world, that is something that is very good in 3D. Like you have that sort of feeling like you're really having the sound of what is around you. And there was a lot of iteration on the assets themselves to get rid of the noise. It is noise, but have more of that tappy rain instead of the noise that you can have. So we have actually, I think it's around 30 emitters, but I don't really know. I don't want to say wrong numbers. Again, it would be good to have the team here to explain on every little thing exactly how they made it. They would be so much better than me to explain the details of that.
Yeah, like the huge round table.
Yeah. Yeah, but I know we have all those samples of rain hitting things. When you have all of them playing together, it feels like rain. And we have very, very few noisy ones. We do have some because it feels like for very strong rain, if you don't have a sort of constant noise layer, it doesn't really feel like heavy rain.
Yeah, like the background canvas sort of.
Yeah, so we have both of them. It's actually very handy for the mix to have them separate as well. You can play with the intensity. And I guess, the noise floor and the noise feel of the rain was a big enemy. And Ben did a great job at giving a lot of texture to that rain. And it wasn't easy, especially because his system is complex and has a lot of emitters. So you're playing a lot of content simultaneously. That can easily become too much and result in noise. Yeah, it's a combination of the implementation systems that are very dynamic and the sound that has been tailored for that implementation.
Okay, well, we're approaching the end of our time here. Unfortunately, I could talk about this for a few more hours. I have so many things I want to know about this game. But for a fun question for the end, is there any particular sound or system or moment in the game that you two are especially proud of? Favorite things you worked on this project?
Always the difficult question. I guess I could mention two things now that I've played the game as a customer, so to speak. It was really pleasant for me to notice that Celine's pistol, the sidearm, has my old weapon sounds in it, mixed a bit differently than originally, but still I recognize my own pistol sound from there, and that made me really happy. And it sounds great, actually, in the game with all the awesome tales. And also, I'm kind of proud of how responsive and human Celine's character feels like. Even in the most intense combat, the systems driving her vocal sounds, for example, react to her health level. She sounds more pained when the health is low, and little things like that, which never went overboard with complexity, but are granular enough so Celine feels really responsive to the situation she's in. Really proud of that.
I guess for me, at some point you feel like, okay, we've probably done a good job, but you never know until people have heard it and see how they feel. And then really seeing that people are really enjoying the 3D audio, enjoying the haptics and the sound design as well. And that's probably the thing that makes me the most proud of. It touches people. It's not just us doing a good job and feeling like we've done a good job. It's really people saying, hey guys, you made a good job. And that makes you realize more than what you did yourself, actually. Otherwise, for me, it's really the fact that we made it, like it was actually such a challenge to make this game. a lot of content with the COVID. I'm just happy of the sum of everything. When it comes together, it feels like it's part of the same world, even though all those sounds are super strange. That's the thing that I'm the most proud of. It's just the final product that I feel is working, because that was really not guaranteed. So yeah, I'm basically proud of everybody in the project. Everybody has contributed, seeing that working together and people loving it. Yeah, definitely.
Well, it's something that you should be proud of because it's quite an achievement. So congratulations for sure.
Thanks.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, I was going to say the game, it sounds great. It's a lot of fun to play, but it's also, we didn't get too far into the story because I didn't want to spoil anything, but it's emotionally very powerful by the time you get to the end of this game and you realize what's really going on with Celine and this planet. And
Absolutely.
I wasn't expecting that going in, but by the end of it, I was struck by how this game came together and what the story meant. So congratulations. You all did a really amazing job.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today, and hopefully we'll have you on back next time you got another game to ship.
Yeah, sounds great, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tonebenders is produced by Timothy Muirhead, Renee Coronado, and Teresa Morrow. Theme music is by Mark Strait. Send your emails to info@tonebenderspodcast.com. Follow us on Twitter via @thetonebenders and join Tonebenders Podcast on Facebook. Support this podcast. You can use our links when you shop with Amazon or B&H, or leave us a tip. Just go to tonebenderspodcast.com and click the support button. Thanks for listening.